you look at Stewart-Haas Racing over the past 10 years, the most reliable driver on that team has been Kevin Harvick. Harvick has carried that organization on his back since the day he got there, and well, that's nothing new for Harvick because he carried Richard Childress Racing on his back during the first half of his career. Harvick has won the most races at SHR by far and has consistently put that organization in the championship hunt year after year. While Harvick was having all that success, the other three teams could never match what Harvick's team was doing. SHR has had solid seasons as a whole, but it was always Harvick doing the most every year on track. I'll say Stewart-Haas' best season was 2018 when all four cars made the playoffs and all won races. But outside of that 1 year, this team has always had to rely on Harvick to put them in the hunt. Well, guess what? Harvick is retiring at the end of 2023, and after he leaves, I don't feel too confident about this organization. I don't even want to look at the driver roster just yet, but more so just the performance side. SHR hasn't looked fast since 2020. If you find that hard to believe, just look at how Kevin Harvick has performed in recent years. He went from winning 9 races and being the outright best in 2020 to going winless in 2021. He hasn't dominated races like we're accustomed to seeing from Harvick. But in typical Harvick fashion, he always finds a way to finish well even if the organization is not fast. All you gotta do is look at Harvick to judge how your organization is doing because he's that damn good. So why is SHR behind on performance? Well, I remember NASCAR had a parts freeze going into the 2021 season, which means teams wasn't allowed to develop anything. Tony Stewart himself actually talked about this in an interview saying, and I quote, "There are some parts and components that we are not allowed to develop, so those parts were submitted last fall and we're stuck with those." I think some of the other teams probably found some stuff late in the season last year that was a good move for them, and that got them locked into those parts for this year. We just got ourselves behind. We have to figure out how to make it work for the rest of the season and go forward. So that would explain their 2021 struggles, but what about 2022 and so far 2023? NASCAR introduced a new generation car in 2022 and it was a reset for all teams. All the teams was getting majority of their parts from NASCAR, which basically makes this Gen 7 car a spec car. Stewart-Haas Racing did a little bit better in 2022, but not by much. Only 3 wins as an organization, 2 cars only making the playoffs. And so far in 2023, they're looking kind of the same. It's hard to play catch up because once again, everyone has the same parts. You can't develop anything, and Rodney Childress has expressed that multiple times since they went to this Gen 7 car. Maybe SHR just don't got the right people or don't have the right people in place. Who knows? But obviously performance isn't just the only problem at Stewart-Haas Racing. Let's look at the drivers. Like I said, Kevin Harvick is retiring after 2023. Who are they going to put in that Ford car? I understand SHR can use the sponsorship, especially since they're losing Busch Beer, but that would mean putting a paid driver in there like Riley Hurst. But man, the best thing for them is to find someone that brings a ton of talent and funding. But who's out there? Before I even get into that, let's go over the drivers they let pass by. Kyle Larson was one of the hottest free agents in 2020 before and after his incident, and Ford passed up on him. Tony Stewart wanted him before didn't, most likely because Larson was fresh off that racial slur deal. Instead, Hendrick Motorsports picked him up, and look what he's done since then. Then they had a chance at another Kyle, and that's Kyle Busch, and they let him get away. Instead, they kept Eric Almirola, who's mediocre, and signed Ryan Preece. And let me say that I really like Ryan Preece. He has a ton of talent, but he's not Kyle Busch. I would have easily chosen Kyle Busch over Ryan Preece. Then there was other free agents out there, but teams locked them up for the future. Ross Chastain is another driver that stood out, but Trackhouse recently re-signed him. So SHR fumbled the bag trying to snatch up a hot free agent, so now they have to look elsewhere. Is there anybody in the Ford pipeline that's promising? Besides Zane Smith, not really. Ben Rose is a good truck driver. I think his ceiling is Xfinity at best. Haley Deegan hasn't shown any promise so far. SHR got Riley Hurst, but he still hasn't won an Xfinity race as we're recording this. Even though he brings funding, he's not that good. Cole Custer is supposed to come back to Cup if he can tear it up in the Xfinity series this year, but do you really want to take a chance with him again? I'm not saying Cole will repeat how he performed during his first stint with SHR, but I just don't know if Cole Custer will hop in an SHR Cup car and be a championship contender. I could be wrong, but I'd rather go with someone that has more experience than him and that can carry a car. I haven't seen that from Cole Custer. Now I have 3 suggestions. They all don't bring much funding, but they have a ton of potential. They all have experience with the Gen 7 car, and 2 of them at least have won a race in Cup. The first driver being Eric Jones. Now Jones did approach SHR when he was looking for a ride after he was released from JGR, but he said nothing materialized. Jones doesn't bring funding, so that was most likely the reason why he didn't get signed to SHR. Not to mention, I think SHR already had the drivers they wanted for 2023. Eric Almirola unretiring, so that means they can get that Smithfield money. And then Ryan Preece is someone that Tony Stewart likes. Ryan Preece also brings a little bit of funding. The second driver is John Hunter Nemechek. I know he isn't the most popular guy, which I understand because he races kind of dirty at times, but he has a ton of talent. He got a full year in Cup under his belt. He also spent some time in the next gen car and kind of showed out at Homestead last year before he lost it and wrecked. John Hunter does have a personal sponsor, and that's Fire Alarm Services. They seem to follow him wherever he goes, so if he was to land at SHR, they could sponsor him in a few races, while Ford, Haas, and maybe Mobil 1 could sponsor him in other races to fill the season. I could also say the same about Ricky Stenhouse Jr. as well. Some of y'all know I'm high on Stenhouse. He never really had a true good opportunity in top equipment, and I feel like he'll do pretty damn good if he got that opportunity. Stenhouse, just like John Hunter Nemechek, has a sponsor that seems to follow him wherever he goes, and that's Sunny D. Those 3 options are kind of unrealistic at the moment, but they will be the best drivers to go with. People have brought up Christopher Bell as a guy SHR can go after and steal him from Toyota. Bell is a dirt racer, but Joe Gibbs doesn't allow Bell to race dirt during the NASCAR season, and that definitely has to frustrate Bell. But will Bell give up a seat at JGR, an organization that's among the top 3 in the sport? You could say the same thing about John Hunter Nemechek as well. He has a clear path back to the Cup Series and is looking to be in a JGR car in the next year or 2, depending on what happens with Truex and Hamlin, who are the oldest drivers on the team. So there's talent out there, but they don't bring the funding. Then there's SHR that passed up on 2 generational talents. I'll tell you what they most likely go do. Bring Riley Hurst into the Cup Series in 2024. It sucks, but it makes business sense. Busch Beer is leaving SHR, and unless they find a big time sponsor, they gotta fill that hole. Riley brings the funding, he won't be bringing the performance though. Yeah, he's improving in Xfinity, but remember, the car he's driving won 8 races in a season just a few years ago with Chase Briscoe. So if Riley Hurst moves up, SHR will have 2 paid drivers in Cup, and they're going to rely on Chase Briscoe and Ryan Preece to bring the performance. And if that's the case, then both of these drivers need to step it up now. Chase Briscoe is 3 years into Cup, he should know how everything works now, and Ryan Preece and his team need to hurry up and get their feet underneath them so they can hit the ground running. I honestly think that Rodney Childress should be the crew chief for one of these drivers. That will probably help one of them out in a big way. One last thing I want to say about this team is Tony Stewart not being as involved nowadays. Stewart got so much going on. He's drag racing, he's handling SRX and other things. But him focusing on his NASCAR team seems to be in the back behind his drag racing along with other things. Tony Stewart hasn't been happy with NASCAR, which will obviously make him even be more distant from it than before. I feel like without his involvement, the team won't fully thrive. If SHR doesn't get their shit together real soon, they're going to be looking like Robbie Yates Racing from the mid to late 2000s. The team isn't on life support, but when you look at how the past few years have gone, what they got now, and try to see what they possibly got for the future, it looks bleak. Their top guys retiring, their cars haven't been fast, they passed up on hot free agents, Busch Beer is leaving, and the young prospects they got coming up doesn't look promising besides Zane Smith. And even if they sign him to a Cup contract, he has to go through a learning curve. Unless Zane Smith comes in and be on some Carl Edwards shit and show out in his first year after being a Truck Series driver. I don't know what else to say about Stewart-Haas Racing. I would sit here and say they can easily bounce back soon, but I have my doubts. Is Stewart-Haas Racing best days behind them? We'll have to wait and see. That's my opinion on that. I'm gonna go ahead and roll up out of here. Y'all have a good one. Peace.